Lani Rosales is the COO of the American Genius, and they do a whole bunch of cool stuff. I've known her. We were talking off camera for a little bit. Well, we were on camera, but off the recording part of the camera. You know what I mean. We were talking for a little bit. We've probably known each other online for at least a dozen years, connected through a variety of, how it is where a common friend says, hey, you should check this person out. And you talk to them, and then there you go. So one of the things we wanted to talk to her today about is this thing that seems to get the two of us messaging each other back and forth every quarter, or even more frequently lately, because it seems like they've come out of the woodwork. And that is the fact that, in my estimation, LinkedIn is a complete cluster bomb right now. It is just nuts. And Lani, you've been in the social media space, you've been in the blogging space, you follow business and entrepreneurship. What the hell is wrong with LinkedIn?
I have a working theory. So do you remember there was this terrible show in the early 2000s on VH1, and it was called The Pickup Artist? I think that's what it was called. And it was this super douchey guy with eyeliner and long hair, and he would teach early 20-something nerds how to go hit on a girl. But it was always go in and neg them, go in and act like you don't care, and he'd train him. So anybody who has not seen that should look it up. It's hilarious. But here's my theory. So he put together a basic package of how nerds can get the hot girls, right? Didn't work. It was stupid, but it was a formula. These people would listen to it and implement it. I have not figured out who's doing that on LinkedIn. I think it might be a combination of I don't know, Tim Ferriss and Gary Vee and kind of all that world. Independently, they're fine, but you put them all together and create a formula in your mind of that's how I should act. And I think that there are just people going out there and doing hashtag hustle, hashtag grinded. It is just gross. And I will tell you, we don't even drive a hypercar, supercar. It's just a normal mid-luxury vehicle. And it has happened twice in the past year where there have been people standing next to the car taking selfies with it. Now, we're not talking a Lambo. We're just talking a standard C-Class Mercedes. It's not even this year's, but standing next to it. And I'm you're going to put that on fucking LinkedIn, aren't you? Because they're older. They're not even children. I would understand a child, which that happened the last car we had, there would be kids in the Target parking lot taking pictures of it. Fine. Don't touch it, but fine. But so I think it's a leftover from the pickup artist in the early 2000s, combined with all the inspirational speakers of today. And people are just trying to emulate this. And it's so gross. I hate it, but it has given me a lot of fun red meat to play with.
Well, it's funny you mentioned both Tim Ferriss and Gary Vee, because I would. So let's start with Tim Ferriss first, because I think it was 2006 when the 4-Hour Workweek came out, and I read and reread that book half a dozen times, right? And it was kind of a life changer-ish book, but then again, at the same time, the missing link was the fact that, well, first of all, let's be real. I think both he and Gary Vee didn't start from zero. I think there's a pretty good chance that somebody who goes to a boarding school, when they start their professional career, they probably have a leg up on everybody else. I'm guessing. Now, I don't want to cast aspersions, because I'm not one of those eat the rich type people. But if you're starting with 6 or 7 figures to play with, it's kind of easy to figure out what works and what doesn't. Then the other part of that is they bring you the formula, right? But they don't answer the key questions, which is, I think, why. And another thing we were talking about off camera was the fact that Joe Rogan's interviewing Jordan Peterson, and it just, the interview is 4.5 hours, and it just dropped today. And there's a search for meaning, right? And I don't want to get too philosophical, but there seems to be a search for meaning in work or family or hobbies or whatever, that if you're part of the hustle culture crowd, you can figure out how to take, if you're part of the hustle culture crowd and you've got something to start with, you can figure out how to take care of those things if work is not fulfilling.
Yeah.
And I think what Tim Ferriss did brilliantly on his part was figured out, okay, I've got the cushion, so I can do all that other stuff on my free time. You know, I can be a painter, I can travel the world, I can learn new languages. All this stuff is great, but it's great for retirees who've already got their pension coming in and they've got their 7-figure 401k, and you know, they know that they're going to be comfortable. You can start dabbling in those things. The rest of us are like, okay, well, if I can't find that passion at work, which again, that's an overused word and I can't stand. If I can't find that passion at work, then well, why don't I create a system where I look like I'm hustling, I don't have to work very hard, and things come to me and it's easy. And I think what happened for 15 years or so was that people were just buying into that. Oh, let's make it easy. Let's make it easy. But not having the, I mean, I know some people who are really satisfied with their jobs. It's like, this is a really cool job. I really enjoy this. I really enjoy the work that I'm doing. And they're not looking to make it a 4-hour sort of thing.
Yeah.
And everybody else is in the business of, you know, I got to find that thing. And these guys make it look so easy because they're hustling and they found their passion and all that.
Yeah.
It's overdone.
It is. And you hit on like 10 things that I want to expound upon. Number one, you mentioned that you actually read The 4-Hour Work Week.
I did.
The problem with the cesspool of LinkedIn is that you have people that don't actually read any of these works and assume from just a very brief bit on it that they know, and then they go and extrapolate, right? And so that's the first problem, is there's a culture in the like hustle and grind culture of emulation, but they don't typically complete the package of like actually ingesting the information. So for an example, I love bagging on those types of people. Just red meat, it's fun, but individually, there's nothing actually wrong with what they're saying. It's, for me, it's typically just the delivery of like, you know, does your life suck? Do you want more passion? Like, fucking no. I just want to like sleep an extra hour a night. Like, you're way overcomplicating this, right? But so I think part of the LinkedIn culture that we were talking about is an emulation of people that they see as success, because part of that like hustle and grind culture that's so pervasive does a couple of really dangerous things. First of all, it glamorizes like the 16-hour workday, which I know is the opposite of what Tim Ferriss has said, but like it glamorizes like not sleeping. It glamorizes like hustling until you're, you know, almost dead. And that's great if you're 22 and you have the energy to do that. And I think it's easy to glamorize. You hit 30 and you're kind of like, oh, this isn't as easy. Then you hit 40 and you're like, I'm not fucking doing that. Why would I do, like, I'm way too smart. I can work much more effectively than that now, right? And so I think those are some of the things that it does dangerously. But I think that because they are able to make it look easy, I think that's the gravest sin that they have no control over, but that is taken and extrapolated into these like kids taking a picture with our freaking one of our cars, you know, trying to act like they have a Rolex. I'm like, bro, that's not a Rolex and that's not your car, and you're not successful, because the bottom line with that mentality is it's two things. It's fake it till you make it, which I think there's some merit to that in a corporate setting, but like not necessarily in an entrepreneurial setting. You have to pay your dues just like anyone else. It doesn't come easily, even if you're rich. And the second part is those types of people tend to also be the like get rich quick people. And in another era, like when we were much younger, that would have been like the people that would have figured out like how to resell like yellow pages or something, right? In this era, it just happens to be like all digital, and it doesn't look as nefarious because it's hard to spot when it's bullshit. But like there is kind of a get rich quick mentality because people think they're just going to get online and they're going to be Noah Kagan. No, he fucking paid his dues and worked really hard for a really long time. And he still hustles his ass off and makes no bones about it. But like, none of this just came easily, but that's what it looks like. I would agree that some of these select individuals that are like the inspirational types had some padding going in, but they still had to do the work, and people don't see that part.
Yes, and to be fair to Tim Ferriss, I remember part of the book where he was saying early on, he had like a vitamin supplement business or something like that. He was working 80-hour weeks trying to figure it out. So I applaud the fact that his idea was to distill the things he learned over 80-hour weeks for a few years into how to do this in 1/20th of the time. And that's cool. And I get that. But I think to your point about the search for shortcuts, it's a combination. To me, it seems like a combination of everybody searching for that shortcut and all of the other social platforms to get rolling had some sort of magic formula. I mean, there was something in the algorithm that just worked. You talk about Facebook, something in the algorithm worked. Something in Twitter's algorithm worked. I don't know if LinkedIn ever got to the point where the algorithm was figured out. And, you know, as a result, you've got people chasing the Gary Vee hustle culture thing. And
it really remains, its value really remains kind of for job seekers and employers. That still is kind of its cornerstone. And they spent their first decade trying to be like everybody else, trying to add the features of everybody else. And because they were always the latecomers to the game, they never focused on what their core function was and on really, really making that its public value, because they want to have all the other things. I'm glad they added all the like stories and blogging and all that stuff, because it gives me more things to make fun of. And that's great. I enjoy that. But shit posting only gets you so far and it doesn't pay the bills. So
one of the things that does drive me nuts about LinkedIn, I'll try to put let's say some crypto commentary. I'll take one of my blog posts and repurpose it, add some comments, put it on LinkedIn. After a few days, I'll get a notice from LinkedIn that says, you only have X number of views so far. Try tagging someone to expand the reach. I don't want to do that. And that I don't know your thoughts on that sort of thing, but to me, that seems like they're trying to be Facebook and Twitter. And the reality is,
I see it as almost like, and we probably had these criticisms at the same time in the early days, especially of Twitter. Like there could have been a little bit more coaching, like from within, instead of all of us figuring out the culture, establishing the culture. Now it's out of control. So like it's nothing like what it originally was, just fine. But I think it's LinkedIn's attempt to do that, of kind of like a silent coach, but a lot of it's not really useful, right? Everybody knows to tag people. Everybody knows to theoretically use hashtags. Everybody knows you're supposed to post on any platform. So yeah, sometimes I haven't had that one, but I'll have, your post has had 93 views. Keep it up. And I'm like, 93, are you kidding? You're praising me for nothing. All right, whatever, man. Thank you. That feels good. But I think they're trying to get that dopamine hit and get you addicted to LinkedIn instead of the others. They're all trying to be that place.
Yeah, and it's funny because I have a Substack newsletter, which everyone has. Everyone has a podcast these days now. Everyone has a Substack newsletter, and Substack did the same sort of thing. You know, your last post was viewed by 31 people. Keep it up. I'm like, what?
That's bad.
I don't like this. No, this is not good. From your perch running both the news site and the real estate world of the American Genius, I want to talk a little bit about what else you've seen in entrepreneurial culture, business startups, those sorts of things of late that is either causing your antenna to go up for a good reason or making you have the same sort of reaction you would have on these LinkedIn posts.
Yeah, I think real estate's a fun one to dive into. And some of the things that I'm seeing, I do think that, and we'll take a lot of credit for it, which is realtors specifically in the early 2000s did not understand that every single one of them was an entrepreneur. Even if you hang with another broker, you're an entrepreneur. Every single one is an entrepreneur. So we drilled that and drilled that for like over a decade. Everybody gets that. So good to go there. And then we moved on to screaming about you're not a startup just because you have a cool website. Like brokers, realtors, you are not a startup. There's a very specific meaning to startup. It means that you're a technology offering seeking funding. Otherwise, you are a brokerage, a small business, an entrepreneur, whatever. And a lot of the stigma around any of those has faded. So why do you need to be a startup? But the thing that I'm seeing right now is a lot of people, especially in the real estate industry, practitioners, feeling a lot of uncertainty and a lot of pressure because of prop tech and thinking that because there's a new word on it, we used to call it real estate tech. What's the big deal? I don't know anybody's freaking out about it. But because there's a new word, there's a lot of uncertainty about what the new big, not new, but what the big boys are doing. A lot of people feel tremendous pressure, but it's unmerited in a lot of cases for two reasons. Number one, as a small business, I kind of think about what Amazon's doing to make sure that I'm kind of forecasting properly, but they're not a threat to me. We don't do the same thing. Why am I worried about Amazon? Just because they're also a business, right? And number two, I think that there is a level of uncertainty in the industry because I feel like there's kind of a malaise of like, there's, especially anybody who's a veteran of real estate, we've been reading everything for so long that now it's kind of like, just let me work, right? So the other uncertainty in the market with practitioners is there's a rise in members of the National Association of Realtors. And so now we're having that conversation again of like, well, they should have stricter standards because it doesn't affect you like at all. And so the position continues to be like it. We've seen every 15, 20 years, this conversation comes up of there are so many practitioners. We're all going after the same piece of the pie. Not really. I mean, first year is still going to make less than minimum wage on average. Second year is not going to happen for a lot of them. So don't know why you're thinking you're so threatened. Just keep doing your job.
Isn't it the same in a lot of industries like that, where the curve
Yes.
is such that nobody makes money the first year, and
Right.
a small percentage are going to be up here, and then that fat middle is those who have paid their dues and have stuck it out, and
Yeah,
some of them are.
I would argue that it's a similar feeling that tech has no longer experiencing, but did with all of the boot camps that came to be. And so there were some fly by night, there were some really well established, but a huge portion of them have shut down. And so you have some big players left and some good players left. But initially, when all that was happening, there was this huge threat to the industry. There are too many devs. Boot camps are flooding the streets with developers. Yeah, but like you still have to put them through the paces. And if they can't get through the interview process, how did that threaten anybody? Like at the entry level, yeah, there was a glut for entry level, but it's a similar sentiment. And I think a lot of industries go through that, with whatever, anytime there's any new entry into a certain market. So like back to real estate, people were threatened a lot by flippers getting their own licenses so they could do their own. Well, Zillow has made sure to demonstrate that that is not a tenable move. Gloriously, spectacularly demonstrated that it is not a feasible move, especially in this market.
So that's interesting. I wanted to ask you about that because that was a pretty quick crash and burn, right?
Yeah, my theory on that though is that if they weren't a publicly traded company and they could have just done what they needed to do, I think they would have been able to make it succeed, but they had to present this beautiful picture. And actually they've had a couple of lawsuits against them. And what's happening is these class action lawsuits are forming of people that invested or bought stock within these 3 weeks, anybody who bought within these 3 weeks, they said on TV that this is doing great. But then the next week, the Q3 came out and they fucking tanked. And so you misled us. And so they're in a lot of trouble for that. But what was really shocking to me was that looking at the numbers, that program was accounting for like half of the income for Zillow for that year. And I was like, whoa, a new program. I could see why they were like, yeah, let's go into this program. Let's put like every dollar we have into it. But then to like jerk that out, like that they're going to have a tough time. But anybody that likes stocks might not be a bad time to buy and hold for a really long time because they will come back.
Is somebody else going to try to fill that void though? A mid-size player of some sort, or is it just you got to leave it to the Tarek El Masouis of the world to go in and buy a bunch of properties and flip them?
So my personal opinion is I actually think it works best at like low to mid scale, kind of like Tarek does. Like he's not going to do 80,000 sides in a year. Just not going to happen. It's not feasible. So I think it works best. But what was really surprising from all of that program being cut is Zillow is the royalty of knowing the data and knowing the numbers and having access to all the data. And of course, it's why they joined the National Association of Realtors as brokers, was never even for that move. It was so that they could have RPR data. Like you can't have it unless you're a member, right? So that was like a brilliant move on Zillow's part, even though they swore forever they were never going to practice real estate. People like you and me are like, yeah, you are. You're going to do it. We knew you were going to do it. But brilliant move on their part. But for the people that have the most data on the planet, for them to be the ones to go up and fuck this up so colossally proves that it really only truly flipping works on a very local scale. And I think a lot of those flipping shows, if you watch them on HGTV, I know they're glamorized, but I've noticed in the past year or two, what they've done is they've had like an episode where they've done like guest flippers, and basically to show like, yeah, you can be in the next subdivision or not subdivision, but city over and not know what the fuck you're doing in this city. You don't have the connections. You don't know what this market is. And so I think Zillow proved that flipping is a great moneymaker if you're very local and you know what the fuck you're doing in that very, very local market. Outside of that, they proved that it is not a scalable option. Now, will anybody move in and take over? Yeah, a bunch are trying to right now. And there will be prop tech companies that pop up out of nowhere and, go get all sexy in front of VCs and pull some money. But ultimately, I think Zillow proved that it doesn't scale. It's not tenable. And that sucks.
You are in Austin, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So you've watched the Austin market. And so I guess two-part question. Number one, has it been as crazy in Austin as it's been everywhere else?
Yeah.
And then number two, where do you see it going over the next year or so with all of the noise around everything that's going on in the economy?
Yeah, so Austin's kind of a weird one because it's always been such a popular and almost like, I don't want to say glorified because that's not the right word, but glamorized city. A lot of people for the past 15 years have sold their house in, wherever and moved to Austin because they're going to make it, right? Like that's like Hollywood in the 50s. You just sacrifice everything, you come here and you're going to make it. Or they come to a music festival and they're like, I want to live like this forever, man. And but it's only like that for a couple of weeks a year. So oops. But because Austin is really one of those super, super diverse, very, very cool cities and has it's a lot of natural beauty and a lot of music and art and everything. It is an attractive place, always has been. Austin has been this really unique, large growing city, and that prices have just gone like this over the years, right? Just like this all the time, no matter what the market nationally is. Other cities do the standard roller coaster, right? On the way up. But Austin has just always really slowly gone like this. But what happened was during the pandemic, I would actually blame Zillow offers in part for this. You saw it go like this and then like this for the first time in ever. And it was just like skyrocketing. It's like, wait, slow down. And so it is still a lot of people coming here that haven't lined their job up, that rent because they don't have any other option yet. And so there's a population boom. And there's some really huge problems that come with that. But the reason for it is because Austin, of course, makes every news headline for being an amazing place to live. And it is. Like I choose to live here, so I'm validating my own choices. But the problems that we're seeing are the market has changed substantially. And I would say a lot of it has to do with kind of the glorification of tech. And we're no longer a city where you just kind of like pull up by your bootstraps. Tech companies now are funded, they're getting larger. And so it's no longer kind of the like bootstrap mentality of like, go pull yourself up. It's now changed dramatically. We're now a nascent technology. We have so much more than we used to. And so there's health tech, fintech, edutech, like all these different types of tech that weren't even here 5 years ago. And so the market is bringing a lot of people naturally. And you have, Elon Musk just set up a huge Tesla factory. We have a huge Samsung factory, like a multi-bajillion job factory going in here. And so people see those headlines, and it goes back to people looking at the title of 4-Hour Workweek and making life decisions based on not reading the actual book. People aren't reading the actual book about Austin before they move here. They're just like, oh, cool, barbecue, cool people, music festivals, great home values, technology, I'm in, and like just fucking pull up roots and come here, which is great. I'm fine with it because it means that we get cool companies here. It means we get cool restaurants that otherwise wouldn't be here. Whatever, growth is growth. I was raised here, so I've seen it change since the 80s. And so it's obviously very different from then, when the music venues all had weed growing out front because people would smoke their blunts and then, tap them on the way out of a music venue, and there's seeds. And so like Austin's changed a lot. It's very attractive. I don't worry about the future of values because they have, when they started going like that really only lasted about 100 days. And then it started going back to the whatever. But I'm in a new home subdivision and we're really far north. I'm not even technically in Austin. I'm in Leander, which is like 45-minute drive to downtown. Outside of Texas, you would call it not Austin because the state isn't so big that it takes like 12 hours to drive across. But here we kind of loosely say where everything is. But in 2020, was it 2020? What year are we in? Yeah. So last year, so 2021 in the summer is when everything blew up. And investors in this new home subdivision where we live, this same floor plan sold down the street. Ours, and Ben would be very mad if I was sharing home values, but 375, the exact same floor plan with less amenities for 720 down the street. That's a 1-year-old house. And so everybody was like, what? Hold on. And then this neighborhood changed from a 300,000 to almost $1 million now in just 2 years, which is, great, but also for anybody looking to buy, that's terrible.
Yeah. And that's an interesting segue into the other question I was going to ask, because I've spent time in Texas, not enough time in Austin, but spent time in Dallas and Houston, a lot of time in Dallas. My sense is twofold. Number one, there's the rest of Texas, and then there's Austin. And Austin has the whole keep Austin weird thing. And then what I hear from folks about Austin of late is that the Californians are moving in. And with them, they're bringing their political leanings. And, for every Rogan and Elon Musk, you've got a whole bunch of other people who are like, wow, this is a lot cheaper than the Bay Area that I'm used to. So is it changing? Is Austin still weird and weird enough? Or is it getting to the point where it's going to be too weird and a little too California?
Austin has been very attractive to Californians since the late 90s en masse. And so the people that you typically hear complain about it the most are people that have only been here for about 5 or 6 years. And now they're like, everything's changing. It's like, okay, yes, but no. And so we went through the .com bust, and that saw an exodus of a lot of people from California that had come here, had their money, but then had to sell their white BMW because it didn't work out, and then went home. But yeah, Austin is hugely attractive, but Austin has, and this has just been a very strange time, but Austin has been extremely, and I'm not going to reveal my own personal leanings, but Austin has been extremely, extremely liberal forever. That liberalism used to be more focused on the environment. So for example, until, the mid 2000s, the air rights were owned by the city on like all the buildings downtown. So you couldn't do a high rise, even if you wanted to, just because they wanted to be able to see out into the hill country and protect as much and not have high rises, right? Right or wrong on that theory, that's that's where a lot of the energy was in kind of protecting the natural beauty of Austin. And that's kind of keep Austin weird. Like, we're hippies. You know, if someone wants to go smoke weed in their backyard, who cares? No big deal. Don't litter, and like, let's be nice. That has evolved obviously into some really contentious issues such as the camping ban in Austin has been extremely contentious. And some people believe that homelessness is best served by allowing people to just set up camp anywhere, which is fine. But the problem with that is that there are a lot of changing laws with how the police can interact with the camps. They can't just go in what they used to do on the fringes of town, not everywhere, but like way far north Austin where we were, which is called the Lakeline area. The police officers that we know would spend part of their day going out into the woods where the camps were and asking, do you have water? Oh my gosh, your teeth are broken. Let's drive you out to go make sure that you can get into the clinic. Like, but then it became to where they can't approach them. Like, it's harassment if you approach a camp, which I think I might feel that way. Like, if I lived in the woods and a cop's just rolling up, like, I wasn't doing anything, dude, just like back off. But so yeah, Austin has changed. The politics, I would argue, have not changed. I think the venom behind the politics have changed, and the focus of what liberalism is in Austin has changed. It is basically illegal to be a Republican or a libertarian in Austin. You have to go move kind of far out, like Leander or Liberty Hill. So like, you gotta be careful.
Where do you see the real estate market nationally going with all that's happening, and from your perch, from what you saw in Austin and how it compares to maybe brokers and agents that you're talking to in other parts of the world, where do you see it going?
Yeah, I don't think Austin is a good representative of national at all in any way, shape, or form. But I do think that we're still going to be in for a year of struggle, and that's, you know, a lot of it depends on what the Fed does, how many times they change rates. But what's become funny, I know I used to be a huge critic of the National Association of Realtors, but that was because you remember the last chief economist that they had was a little dishonest about how the market was going, and then it crashed, and we were all like, what the fuck, bro, you just said everything was good, right? And like cheerleaded. So the ironic part is I've kind of been looking to Dr. Yoon, their current economist, as kind of the North Star of information, because he's one of the only economists that I found that has been really, really honest about like, okay, this is what we're struggling with. And one of the things that he's been yarping at for like 4 years is inventory levels remaining tight. If somebody can't get to a house, how are they supposed to buy if there's not one available? So that's been a really big struggle, and housing starts just have not and cannot keep up with that. And even if all builders built to their capacity right now, they still don't have the labor or materials within cost to make a reasonably priced house to meet the needs, especially of first-time home buyers. And so we're in like this weird scenario where buying is looking good. The market's actually okay. Sales are performing better than they should for this time of year, but we're about to take a hit, and that is 7% inflation. That's fucking atrocious. And so the focus is no longer on, oh, we have student loan debt, we can't buy our first house. It's no longer on that. It's like, can I afford groceries this month? Like, as a normal American, because cost of living increases typically, for example, at Apple, are 1 to 3% a year. That's what they give as cost of living increases. Well, if inflation alone is 7%, I'm out 4%. My salary just went down. And so I think that the real estate market is going to look like it's struggling, even though it's doing okay. I think it's going to look like it's struggling, because there's no way that if you don't have inventory, sales can't go up, even if you want them to. And so there's a lot of pressure on the market, but there's also a lot of uncertainty and a lot of political uncertainty. Let's be honest. And I think that has a lot of people feeling very, very nervous about whatever investment they make, whether it's, anything from real estate to crypto. There's just so much up in the air right now. But if the Fed sticks with what they've said, 4 increases, we're still going to hurt. I mean, the market has to correct, and that's going to penalize. But when home values are still going up, people that actually own properties already, they're in a good position. So it's bad for people who don't currently own and who want to. It's good for people who do own, and I think it's going to stay that way all year.
Yeah, and it's weird to mention that. I had a friend who told me that, well, if you got a mortgage at under 4%, which let's face it, everybody was able to do if you in the last couple of years, and inflation is 7%, then there's going to be, I mean, you're getting 3% in your pocket just by paying your mortgage, in theory. And a lot of people are going to be looking at that, and you're going to be stuck with what's happening to me from what I see is, unless you're forced to do something, then you're probably best off on the sidelines with a lot of things, with home purchases, because you run into the situation where, okay, I could sell my home for double what I spent for it 5 years ago. That's great. Where am I going to live?
Yeah. Yeah, no, because I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, $375 for this house. I love our home, but if we sold this for the $750 that we could get for it, am I going to go, what am I going to buy at the same value? It's not going to be a $750,000. It's not going to be a huge upgrade. It's going to be a lateral move. And so you're right. I think the sidelines are, I think in times of uncertainty, that's probably holding anything as the safest bet. But I will say the pandemic has shifted a lot because people's values just culturally have changed in the past couple of years. People have to spend more time at home, whether they like it or not. And so a lot of people at this time had to move because they're looking at it like, oh my gosh, me and my partner are working from the kitchen table and our kids doing fucking homework all day from the kitchen table. We cannot stay in a 4 feet space together this long. Like, we're going to kill each other. And that's not my situation, but like, I hear that a lot. And so a lot of people did have to upgrade their size. But what I did hear a lot about is people tried to make a lateral move. So some of them had to downgrade on quality, move to older homes or, neighborhoods in their school division that would not be as desirable. But, a lot of people had to do what they had to do, but people are at home. They want to be at home. And so I think that's changing. I do think that one of the things that was way overblown was people glamorizing, and there we go with that word again, but people glamorizing remote work and saying, well, I can move to anywhere. I can move to Bali and work remotely. You're not going to, but yeah, you might move to kind of what we did, was just move further out of town and it's cheaper, right? And so a lot of people did make those moves, but it was not as like cross-country moves as people talked about. I mean, it happened at an accelerated rate for sure, but you didn't have 50% of the population get in a car and come to Austin. Give me a fucking break.
Yeah, and I think that I saw that just in my circle of people where it didn't cause the move to happen, but if the move was already planned, then it got the wheels even farther in motion. I mean, I know people who left the Bay Area and moved to Austin, that they were planning on doing that before the pandemic and went ahead and did that anyway. I know people who they're ramping up the chance to move to from the East Coast to Florida, for instance.
Yeah.
And
well, and the data doesn't support it. I really thought, because people in my circle were moving a lot, just different places, and people in our circles of entrepreneurs were saying, why am I paying California rates? I can go live in South Dakota and literally have a ranch for what I pay to live in this 2-bedroom house. And so I saw a lot of that, and I thought that's what was happening, but realtor.com data showed that the actual move rate barely changed a clip. I was really surprised to learn that.
Store shelves, shopping, groceries, etc. How's that been by you?
That's a good question. I think it depends on what store you go to. So we have a chain of stores called HEB, and it's a grocer, and it's only in Texas. They vowed to never go outside of Texas. They have kind of bent over backwards to just fulfill, and I don't know how they've just magically done it. Now, I can go in the toilet paper aisle, for example, and there will be a big, huge gap, and there's a certain brand they couldn't get, but they had 1,000 million of the comparable brand. It's not like shelves are empty. And so I've noticed that there are gaps in the shelves, but then you go to places like Walmart, there are, certain sections that are entirely cleaned out. And so I think it really depends on how each company is handling fulfillment. And I would argue that HEB is just one of those like super philanthropic companies that, like, when the pandemic came, they gave hazard pay. I think they're still giving employees hazard pay, like, immediately. And they I don't know. So I think that when it comes to shelves, it really depends. Now, that's just groceries. If I want something at Target, I am not going to find that thing until I go to the fourth Target. That's what I did last weekend, even though we've been basically self-quarantined for a billion years. I wanted this towel rack thing really badly, and I wanted it last weekend, and I was not going to wait for Amazon to deliver it next week. And so I hunted it down, never found it, of course, but those are the types of things that kind of less important. So groceries, we're not really suffering. We might be on certain sides of town. I couldn't tell you, but in North Austin where we are, it's fine. But it's the kind of like ancillary things. But I think a lot of companies like Target specifically are really trying to move people to their website anyways. And so I think this is kind of a benefit to them to have those sparse shelves. I feel like some of them are doing it on purpose and blaming the supply chain crisis.
Yeah, the other thing I noticed about Target, I don't know if this is the case by you, I found this really puzzling because one of the things that seemed to be the case with my trips to Target before the pandemic was customer service, let's get you into a line, somebody with a red shirt, etc. It seemed as if, and I think this was a 2021 thing at the Target near me, the one that we go to the most often. It seemed as if they flipped the switch and there's so many self-checkouts. It used to be one self-checkout and nobody uses it, or two self-checkouts. Now it's like they're manning the self-checkout desk. And I feel as if I need to be wearing a red shirt when I go in to get myself into the mentality of I've got to check my own stuff out, because stores like that, I want them to check me out. Aldi, it's the same way, and Aldi's added self-check, a lot of the self-check. I know this is a Walmart thing. They want you going into the self-checkout sort of deal. But has that happened at the Targets by you?
It's actually been that way for several years here, to where it's self-checkout on both sides of the store and then like one aisle open in the middle of the store for anybody who wants the manual. I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. I'm extremely introverted, so I am not in public to interact anyways. Please don't talk to me. And so my shirt says, "Ooh, people," and that's very much how I feel. But even our grocery store now has a self-checkout option, and I like it because I don't have to have that like excruciating, like, "How's your day going?" "Great. How's yours?" "Oh yeah, weather." "Oh yeah, weather." "Okay, have a good day. You too." I'm like, "Oh, can we just not?" And so for me, it's been that way for a long time here at almost everywhere. And so I'm totally fine with it. But I will say, when it first started, when they didn't have their systems down, like here's how I feel. If their systems are not effective, it is annoying as hell. So for example, Walmart's way they do it is just terrible. They don't have the right demographic for it. And so they have somebody hovering over you like 3 feet away. First of all, get the fuck away from me. I don't want you coughing on me. Like, please back up. And also, again, I'm not here to make friends. So just like, I don't want to talk. So the fact that you're 3 feet away from me looking at what I'm doing, just check me out if you're going to do that. And then if you're going to make me, and I don't know if all Walmarts are like this, but like the one here, then you have to at the door produce your receipt, and they'll always be like, "Open your bag." And it's like, oh my God, just if you had checked me out, this wouldn't have been a fucking problem. So like places like Target, I'm fine with because they're very efficient here with the systems where you just walk in and walk out. But Walmart, where I have extra steps and I have extra people, it like, that's stupid. I don't need that. Thank you very much.
Well, and I think, and I've spent way too much time at Costco. I think that part of this is that Costco mentality of we're checking the receipt for loss prevention, but we're not. It's because you're a member of a club and we want you to feel special. And if you got a kid with you, we'll put a little smiley face on the thing. We just want to make sure that you got all the stuff you paid for. And that's the real reason they do it. The real reason they do it at every other place is to make sure that you're not absconding with something that you didn't pay for. But I think they're not the kind of place, in a Walmart's case, not the kind of place that renders itself a private club that you feel esteemed you're esteemed to shop at Walmart.
Are you an esteemed Costco member?
Yeah, I mean it's something I
Wow.
swear by. But part of it is because I know a little too much about how Costco operates, from having to go in there and sell wine for a third party before. But yeah, but it's definitely but we've noticed some of the things are a little less prevalent at Costco, but I wouldn't even come close to saying that the shelves are bare at all.
No, I would actually say Costco is where I actually did not renew my membership this year because through the pandemic, I feel like they have struggled the most. Like there have been empty shelves repeatedly. And I get the toilet paper thing, blah, 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 whatever. But like normal, regular things like, oh, we don't have steaks today. Why the fuck don't you have steaks? Any steak? You don't have any? Do you have ground beef? Like, do you have meat? No, chicken. Well, why am I paying to come here? So I here they've struggled, but they get what they have to get the good deals on. And if they don't get a good deal, they just don't get it.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think a lot of people don't know about Costco is how much they squeeze their suppliers to get the deals. That we haven't had the meat shortage by us. We have had the price increases on meat writ large, and that's because, well, it's more expensive to buy food. So
yeah. Oh, if I hear that meat has gone up 5% one more time, are you fucking kidding? Like, have you bought a skirt steak in the last year? It used to be like $9 for a cheap skirt steak. I paid $21 for some skirt steak for the same amount yesterday. I was like, that's not 5%. I'm not really good at math, but I feel like that is not a 5% increase.
Yeah, and I think what happened is that folks who are using this, and it's not, they're just, let's face it, everybody is gaming the system. They're gonna mess with the numbers. The folks who add this stuff up have already said that the next month when you see it's like the February 10th or 9th or something like that, you'll see the numbers, and it's going to be a different metric, the basket of goods. So it's very possible that the inflation rate will come down a little bit from the 7%. And of course, that'll be lauded as a victory. The reality is they're just taking a different basket of goods. And I think what's happened in the case of meat was, at least this is what I've seen, is you didn't notice in June of 2020 that it's maybe a bit more for your steak. And then October of 2020, it's a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But now the numbers are coming out and they're saying, well, 5% increase in the price of beef. Well, that's compared to last year at this time.
Yeah.
And that doesn't take into account the 5% from the year before. So it just keeps compounding on top of it. I mean, I know that I like the prime beef if I can get it, but I'm not gonna pay $17.99 a pound for a prime ribeye, because I mean, you don't want sticker shock when you're thinking about Sunday dinner. And I think that that's one of the things that is driving me crazy about whatever this economy is that we're in, is that they're discounting everyone's sticker shock.
Yes, I think especially the emotional side, but I would add that it really does depend on the company. So HEB, for example, basically took the position privately that we're going to try to keep our prices the same. We're going to take the loss, but we're going to make it up in volume, as opposed to what every single grocer and every single company on the planet did. So I can still get New York strip for $12.99 a pound, just like I could 2 years ago. I know they're paying more for it, but I'm going to buy 3 because I didn't have to pay what I'm going to pay down the street, who's going to screw me, when they worked really hard to try to keep prices the same. So I think our area is in a little bit of a different situation because we have a major grocer that basically took a different footing at the very beginning of all of this. And so they've bought a ton of loyalty because of that may have existed before, but now people will skip. There are not a lot of other grocers here. They basically, like, Albertsons is gone. There's still Randall's some places, but people will drive past the Randall's to go to the HEB because of that. But I think the problem that we're having, especially with this uncertainty, is you said that a lot of companies are taking advantage of it. And I think that's true. And I would illustrate that when Katrina hit, a lot of companies used that as an excuse. I worked in commercial real estate very early in my career, and Katrina blew through, and we would get bids on like lumber, for example, and it would be like 60% higher. And there would be a note that says, Because of Katrina and all the damage we took on, we, are lower and we have to. Okay, but you're not even anywhere near New Orleans. You're in fucking Chicago. How did you get hit? Right? But what happened was all these companies jacked all their prices up after Katrina because of Katrina and sent notes to all the builders and all the developers like, oops, sorry. After Katrina, it'll go back down. Of course it didn't go back down. That was just the new price. And that's the way it stayed. And so that's one of my problems with what's going on right now is we're going to see a lot of that. Like, well, sorry, the pandemic really has us in inflation. Those things we have to raise prices. And you're thinking, oh, well, after the pandemic, whatever the fuck that means, like it'll come down. It's fine. No, if prices have gone up, they are not coming back down on like anything. Why would they? If a company can squeeze more out of you, they're going to. And so I do worry about that effect of people having this false hope that somehow prices are going to come back down. Will salaries potentially go up? Yes, that's always a lagging indicator though. And it's always going to be behind. And so people are going to feel the pain in the meantime and have this false hope that it's just going to get better. I don't know that it necessarily does.
How's the restaurant and takeout and all of that community near you?
Yeah. So in Austin, obviously a lot of bars shut down. A lot of restaurants transitioned to food. Texas actually suspended a lot of the laws and rules to where you can literally drive up to places and get alcohol in a bag or a box or whatever. And
Right.
just like Texas already had drive-through alcohol barns anywhere where you could drive through, say I want six packs, put them in the trunk and pay out the window. And so like we've always been a little willy-nilly, but I know restaurants have continued to struggle, but I would suspect based on what I've heard, and I don't have the data behind to assert this as a fact, but I believe that more restaurants stayed open in Austin than most large cities. And so I think that most of them were able to kind of pivot and offer to go. And I think people actually eat more probably restaurant food than they did before the pandemic because there's only so much homemade food you can eat in a day.
Yeah. We were all left with this reality that we've got to either step up our home chef game or be prepared to order in and tip generously. And
I think what might be a little bit different in Austin, however, is there's been always been kind of a rejection of corporate life and an embracing of local businesses. And so I think a huge portion of people that I would say probably like middle and upper class chose to seek out local businesses during the pandemic and continue to do so, as opposed to maybe like a pizza chain or something. Even though it's like a local franchise, they'll still try to go to like the local pizzeria. So I think that Austin's mentality has helped us to kind of get through it in ways that are unique to kind of a hippieville, hipster place like Austin.
Let's talk a little bit about the American genius and specifically the non-real estate part of the world. Give me a semi-bold prediction that will hold you to, and then a year from now we'll do another thing and we'll play the clip and embarrass you. But give me a semi-bold prediction about what you think might be happening in the year to come.
I want to say it's bullshit that you did not give me this question in advance, because for anybody looking in, like I didn't get any questions in advance, so I'm gonna have to just pull this out of nowhere.
I'm doing my job.
Non-real estate. So the American Genius News Network has an entrepreneur division and a real estate division. And so I'll stick to the entrepreneur section for this. I would predict that although the stigma around gig work and trying to kind of like cobble together like 4 different gigs into one job, I think that the idea of gig work is really losing its luster. It was sold to people as a way to have financial freedom, but really they're having to work more hours and harder than they would if they just had like a standard 9 to 5. So I think a year from now, you'll see the rate of side hustle gig work, that however you want to call it. I think that'll be down. And I think more people are entering the workforce because of that, the traditional, 9 to 5 workforce. And so I think it's going to continue. I'm already seeing it happen, but I think it'll continue to either push people to start their own business instead of feeling like they're entrepreneurs because they drive a car for Uber and they do Uber Eats and they do Fiverr. You're still working for somebody else. So I think we'll see a little bit of people making the decision to stop and either create their own business, doing something similar full-time for themselves, or entering into the workforce. And I think the workforce is already really, really competitive. And so I think that'll add a pressure that isn't as prevalent right now. So I think that'll change kind of what we're seeing in the workforce for sure, especially in the tech sector.
Okay, pause, because I have another question, but I also have a crazy dog who hasn't been out. So I'm just going to
You're
hit
fine.
the pause button. Hold on 1 second. Can you go out? No?
Nope.
This is what we're going to do. We're going to move your bed. There you go.
You need to quit rushing. I already said family first.
I had to, he didn't want to go out because it's, 0 degrees out. And I have got the blinds behind me aren't letting sun in yet, but the blinds over there have a sunbeam. So we moved his dog bed over so that he can enjoy the sunbeam.
That is so nice of you. And I realized you didn't have your headphones in, but what I was saying is quit rushing. I already said family first, and dogs are family.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. Okay, so you were talking about the gig economy.
I think that's breaking. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So here's my next question, because you talked a little bit about commercial real estate and working remotely, but where do you see that landing in the next year or so?
Yeah, that has been one of the most shocking things to me. So data from the National Association of Realtors this month showed that commercial real estate did not take the hit that we all thought it would during the pandemic. It's still firing on all cylinders. But what we're seeing, and what I suspect, and I'm basing this exclusively on my gut and nothing else, I suspect we won't see a whole lot of starts in commercial, but that we'll see things be sustained. So I think there's a lot of creativity going on, which has never before been done. A couple things have happened. Number one, a lot of companies are realizing that some of the office space they have is for vanity reasons. For example, there's a huge skyscraper, the tallest one in Austin going up right now. Who's going to be in it? Facebook. Big surprise. That's kind of their move to be like, they did the same in San Francisco. What's the highest tower? We want to be in it. Like it's fucking like 1982 Wall Street or something, but okay, whatever, dude. So for vanity reasons, a lot of companies have realized, wait, maybe we don't need as much. So for example, Dell has a huge campus here in Austin in Round Rock. And there is another company that's coming in and will be leasing 2 floors of their primary building. And so that's been an interesting move. We suspected that there would be some combining. I still haven't seen a ton of it because I think a lot of companies are still holding out, hoping that they're just going to go back to normal. Especially in tech, which, apologies for continuing back in tech, but that's kind of one of my lanes. Especially in tech, it seems like there's been a lot of rent paid on empty spaces. And I think as people come back, they'll see that the office is not full as they had hoped it would be, and they'll have to do a lot more consolidating. So I think we'll see a lot more subleasing going on than maybe ever, and a lot of combining of spaces. But entrepreneurialism is still firing on all cylinders. So new businesses are still opening every day to take those smaller spaces, those subleases of floors and whatnot. So I think I would have, if you had asked me a year ago, I would have been pretty negative about it, but I've looked at the data in the last year and it's actually good. Shockingly, I really thought it was going to tank because, a restaurant's going under, they're not going to pay rent, but they're actually filling spots back up.
So when it comes to that's puzzling data, because when it comes to, I mean, is this a matter of, okay, I'm not Facebook, I'm some mid-tier, much smaller enterprise technology firm. I need to maintain a presence. I need a hot desk for my people to work at, but I also need to be able to, in order to recruit people and keep people, and to be able to tell them you can work from wherever you need to work. So if that means you're the type of person who comes in 2 days a week, but you want to be at home the other 3 days, that's fine. Is this a case of that, where if you've got like 100 people, you got to have home for 100 of them? They're not all going to be in the office the same day. Maybe you've got 50 slots or whatever, but you still have to maintain a presence.
Yeah, I think we'll still see a lot of that. I think there's still a cultural value on having a beautiful office that you can invite clients to. I don't think that's going away anytime soon. And does that mean you have to have 100 desks for those 100 people? No, we're not seeing that. The data is definitely not showing that. But do you need to have 60 desks? Yeah, maybe. Are they hot desks, as you asked? Yeah. So those people are taking just work on their laptop that's either provided by the company typically, or in other sectors that are not tech. Sometimes they provide their own, which is weird, but yeah, I think so. But I think that's also changing kind of the market of what is an office. So a lot of companies were already moving towards like kind of trying to emulate co-working spaces, right? To where you kind of like, oh, you want to be in a stand-up desk today? Go over in that section. You want to be in a like fucking beanbag or whatever? Cool, go in that section. Like, so we were already kind of moving towards that. I think this has accelerated that. But I also think there's going to be probably not until there's I suspect that once mask mandates are no longer an issue and people are, wearing them if they want to or not, if they don't, when the government's not involved in that anymore, I think you'll see co-working spaces reemerge and come back with a vengeance, because a lot of people are working remotely, but extroverts need human contact, even if it's not like sustained one-on-one. Like, it is draining to the extroversion soul to be in a fucking house for so long. So I think co-working spaces will become super, super relevant again. Hopefully not WeWork, because they're the devil, but they'll do great.
Well, but I wonder if part of the reason that co-working can come back, but WeWork wouldn't be the face of what it looks like, is because WeWork itself was so bloody toxic that it's almost as if your Zillow example from earlier, where Zillow tried to bring its Zillow-ness to this process of flipping, revealed themselves to be not really good at it, got out of it. But then the others who like, oh, we know our stuff, I think we can still make this work. That's probably what, I mean, we had in Chicago area, and of course the name escapes me now because the last time I went in was before the pandemic, but there's a non-WeWork startup co-working thing, and their idea was, well, if WeWork is going to be in the big city hubs, we can be there too if we need to, but why don't we go this part of Chicago, which is not as hip but might not be a bad place, and let's also go to Evanston because it's a suburb that's accessible but it's not super hip, and there's not going to be a WeWork there. And that was how they were competing, and it's the same concept. You want that to be your home and you've got 5 people, you can get space for 5 people. You want to come in once a week and do that. You want just a desk for a day, all of that sort of stuff. And I wonder if that could be part of what could happen to the WeWorks of the world, where it's, and this almost would be the same thing with your example of the gig economy, where, okay, people are now going to be able to pull out the elements that they think are good from any sort of thing like this and avoid the toxic elements from those who maybe got more notoriety, but they got the notoriety because their mission was, let's just get as big as we can and then figure it out.
But I think they'll still do well. It's kind of like people boycott Chick-fil-A and they post about it online and they call them hate nuggets. They're still going through the drive-through though, like secretly, just don't tell anyone. And so I still think WeWork, no matter how terrible it was, I still think that they'll still be a player. I don't think they'll obviously be as big as they were. But yeah, I think co-working definitely is going to, for those that were able to hang on, and we have several in Austin that have been able to make it through this. I think we'll see a lot of new players in the space. I don't know who the next WeWork will be, but I think whoever takes the playbook that you're talking about, where it's okay, we don't need to be in a fancy high rise and have exclusively 22-year-old rich kids, right? Like we can go where the adults are, which is the less glamorous side of town because they have kids that need to be in a school district that doesn't suck. And so I think that whoever that player ends up being, I'm going to be excited to watch that because I think that that's the playbook that'll win in the next 5-10 years.
All right, so I want to shift gears a little bit because you followed the social media space, you know, as long as anybody I know, followed it since before it existed. You mentioned Chick-fil-A, and that made me think of, we've got a Chick-fil-A near us in suburban Chicago. Right next door is a Wendy's. And I'm still curious why Wendy's is what it is on social media. Is that, are they doing it, they're obviously not doing it to get market share, because it seems like a weird endeavor to try to get market share by roasting people. Why is Wendy's the way it is on social?
I wish I could remember the name of the restaurant, but there's this restaurant in San Antonio on the Riverwalk, and you walk in and they immediately say, "What the fuck do you want?" And you're like, "I want a table for food." And they just verbally abuse you the whole time. And like, you have to wear a stupid hat and they like write mean stuff on it. And it's just,
sounds like Ed DeBevick's in Chicago.
yeah. So there's like different types of that where like you go in, people love that. And I don't mean like the fetishization of like verbal abuse, but like people love it because it's not the same. It's silly. So I think even if Wendy's was selling shoes, they would still be the social media position they are because it was unique. The timing was interesting. People were starting to take themselves really, really seriously on social media. So the levity just like was so welcomed, and it has just lasted. And at this point, it's kind of like, you know, with our branding, if we got too corporate, people would look at us like, what are you doing? If I put out a video that was like overly polished, people would be like, what is this? I don't want this anymore. They expect what they know you for. And so I think it was just something that like the timing was right. The comedy was perfect. And they just did a really good job. Did it change their market share? I don't know, but there are times that I saw it and was like, yeah, maybe I do need a Wendy's today. So like it changed like my position just because I hadn't thought of Wendy's, but then I saw it and was like, oh man, okay, yeah, maybe I need a Wendy's.
Well, so the other thing that happened within the last 24 hours was, and I'm not sure if you saw this, McDonald's had to respond to Elon Musk because Elon Musk said, if you accept Dogecoin at McDonald's, I'll eat a Happy Meal on video. Which is that great for McDonald's market share? Maybe, I don't know. But then they responded. It didn't take them too long to respond. So I'm thinking they might have planned for something like this to happen. They decided that they would only accept something that they were calling Grimace coin. And so they had a picture of Grimace with in coin form. And that, I think, kind of was their answer to Elon Musk. But this brings me, I just struggle with a lot of this approach to marketing that is not tied to anything other than it seems like a colossal waste of time to me, but maybe I'm just an old fuddy-duddy.
No, two things. First of all, I think marketing and branding are two totally different things. So I think a lot of the efforts that you're seeing of like unrelated things that companies like, why are you doing that, fall under the branding of just like the idea that if our name is in your mouth, we're winning. So like, I think it falls into that category, not marketing. You can't measure it. If you can't measure it, it's not marketing. And so it has to fall into branding. So there's that. But with that, it always drives me bananas because brands, companies don't understand that Elon Musk is literally just a troll. And like, that is his happy place, is going online and trolling you. And if you give it, like in that case, you kind of have to respond because you've been called out as a, company, and you have to decide how to respond, whatever. That's more like crisis management. But like I don't think a lot of companies think through like, oh, this has nothing to do with McDonald's. He has a shit ton of Dogecoin and is just trying to get people to talk about that and have some dummies go by, whatever. So like, I think that has more to do with his portfolio. And I find that to be really frequent. Like, you're falling for his trolling and it has nothing to do with you. You could have just like had a gift saying, cool, bro, or like, whatever. Like, you didn't have to do a whole thing, but yeah, I don't know. It's definitely changing. And I think that the meme culture has, I don't want to say invaded because that makes it sound like negative, and I actually enjoy it, but meme culture has become part of the corporate branding culture and corporate marketing culture. And so like any large corporation has to have individuals that are like up on their memes, because otherwise they don't know. Like, somebody in the company should have known we're not getting trolled. Elon's talking about his investment. Like, why are we responding at all? Right. But they probably didn't have somebody in the marketing department that was, either receptive to that, understood that, or cared about that. But I don't know, they're kind of famous for McDonald's specifically for stepping it on social media. So I don't know if they're a good example. Anyways.
Well, and I guess it does prove that Elon Musk is one of those individuals playing 4D chess, because he obviously did not go after Wendy's. He went after McDonald's in lieu of going after, Burger King probably would have had a better example or a better response. Taco Bell, I think, would just have posted a picture of a bunch of bean burritos next to Elon smoking weed on Joe Rogan's show. So I guess maybe that's what this video is. It's me auditioning to come help McDonald's solve these marketing and branding problems.
You're fired.
Yeah.
You're fired.
Final parting shots. Anything that we haven't asked about that you wanted to talk about? Any thoughts that are bubbling around that you're thinking, oh, wait a minute?
I don't know. I think one of the things that you and I have talked offline about that kind of goes back to the LinkedIn culture is we've all, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, had to like start policing how we talk in public online. I've gotten in trouble on Facebook and now LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I most recently was warned, which BT dubs, I really liked LinkedIn's process. I've never been on trouble on LinkedIn because I forgot it existed for like 10 years, but like recently I've gotten in trouble because I exist there now. And of course I'm gonna get in trouble, but I called someone a douche and to their face. And it was somebody that liked the comment, and that's like banter. And I thought that was it. But so you get a notification. Have you gotten one on LinkedIn yet? Where it's like, that's community standards. So they send you an email and they have an appeals process to where like you can say why you think this should be reviewed by a human. It goes to human. They'll say yes or no. I really appreciated that because I get in trouble with Facebook a lot and there's no appeals process. It's just a black hole of bullshit. It's just like, oh, you're banned for 24 hours or a year or whatever we feel like. What I've gotten in trouble on Facebook for is calling myself white trash, which that's where I think AI is very, very much failing, is parody, doesn't understand parody at all. Self-deprecation, it does not get self-deprecation, does not care whatsoever. And those are kind of mechanisms that I use a lot in all of our spaces, even our corporate spaces. And so you and I have been, what have you gotten in trouble for? Because I know you've been in trouble on the social medias too.
Yeah, so mine was related to LeBron James. And it was specifically, and I found the Twitter process to be weird because it was, and I'll talk about the post itself in a second, but what happened was right after the post went live, I had screenshotted it because I kind of thought something might be coming, but right after the post went live, it said, you'll be in Twitter jail or whatever it is for 12 hours. And you need to, it's like, we want you to delete this post because it's against our terms of service. And if you agree that it's against our terms of service, you'll delete it and you'll be on probation for 12 hours. So first I looked at it and I'm like, well, I don't agree this is against the terms of service and I want to say this, so I'm not deleting it. And then there was no other way. So you kind of have to, okay, so I'll delete it. So I kept the screenshot and I deleted the post and then took 12 hours off and then came back. What I specifically did was there was I think Enes Kanter is a wonderful, great human being. I think he's doing all the right things. I think the attention that he is putting on the human rights abuses from the Chinese Communist Party, and specifically what's going on with the forced labor and the genocide, and
which he has a lot of practice with, because he did this regarding Turkey a couple of years ago. So he is not new to these waters, these risks.
Right. And well, I mean, and he's also been through, I mean, he's had like threats of things bad happen to him and his family. This has not been easy for him, but he reacted to one of LeBron James's posts about something by saying something on top of LeBron's post. It had, I'm sure, something to do with, LeBron making more money, China, whatever it was. And I said, I think this is a pretty good nuanced response, because I retweeted it. And there's a basketball game, and actually used to be on in the 70s. They would do it at halftime in the NBA games, called Horse, H-O-R-S-E. You spell out the word, I shoot this shot, you respond, oh, you missed it. You get the letter H. First one that spells horse loses. And I said, spelling it out, LeBron is playing horse, or Enes is winning at the game of horse. LeBron is playing the game of W-H-O-R-E. And that was what got me in Twitter jail. Now, I found it really interesting to see what has happened before. And I guess if you come back to that mantra of don't say something on Twitter that you wouldn't say to someone's face, I would say this to LeBron's face.
Yeah, I would definitely say that.
I think you are whoring yourself out to China, and it's blatantly obvious that you are only in it for the money and not in it for any sort of human rights at all. So cool your jets, LeBron. But I would say that to his face. And I find this to be really
I would say that to like anybody's face. I have no problem cussing at people.
Well, I think some of the bigger targets, I mean, I think people like to point out, LeBron, he's a big winner, everything he touches is great and all this sort of stuff. You can't remain silent and keep taking Nike's money and not be a whore. And that's what he's doing. And it's maddening. It's maddening.
Twitter didn't appreciate your opinion.
Twitter corporate did not appreciate my opinion. But what I found that's interesting is that there are other words that you can kind of use, and there are other links that you can kind of send, and there are other gifts that you can kind of send around and attach to LeBron that you'll be okay. It's just, I guess, using the word whore and spelling it out in all caps was probably the thing that got me in trouble.
Yeah, I literally, well, at least there's like some sort of appeals. Facebook will not only delete the post for you, you don't have a choice, which that's happened a couple times. There's no appeals process. But what I find disturbing is not enough people are worried about this culture of like, kind of like, we have to self-censor. And I would argue that that's all sides of any political aisle. I would argue that's anybody. We're all being taught culturally that we have to like be really careful about what we say. I see some of the stuff that I said on Twitter, Facebook, whatever, years ago, and I'm like, whoa, I would definitely not say that today. Like I would be not in danger, but like somebody would come after me, or people would come after me if I said this same thing today. And so I do think, although on one side of the coin, you have LinkedIn, where there's this pervasive culture of like glorifying this kind of like bullshit materialism. On the other side, you have this weird, like pervasive, like culture where it's not just the corporations forcing us into it. People go to work specifically for these corporations because they believe in fighting against misinformation. And so it fuels it. And then just, I feel like we're left in this like really dangerous quagmire where every celebrity or person of influence in any way, shape, or form is supposed to be on the correct side of, you know, whatever history is going on. And they're supposed to make statements, they're supposed to choose. So like right now, artists are hopping off of Spotify saying, you can't have my music if Joe Rogan is allowed to stay here. Tell you what, they paid a butt ton of money for Joe Rogan. He's staying. But now we're all like kind of forced into, gosh, I wish I could remember the title of it. Jerry Baker at Wall Street Journal wrote this amazing post on like how we're being pushed into these silos and kind of how we're almost in this metaverse already where we have to be in our different corners and there's no room in the center, which leaves a majority of Americans actually super, super stranded because I don't think most people are on the extreme one way or the other. You're just, if you're on the extreme, you're louder and you're willing to fight all the time and it's your identity. So I think that this like this censorship that is coming from Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, but also culturally, we do it to each other. Like I've seen people say stuff and I'll message them privately like, hey, I wouldn't say that because people are gonna come after you, like, and do it or don't. I'm not gonna police it, but good luck. And so I don't like where we are. I think I would identify close to the center. And so I feel abandoned by our culture, by our government, by everything. And I definitely know I'm not alone because I have friends on the other end of whatever this aisle is that feel the same way. But we've been taught to do it to ourselves. We're now doing it. Even if Facebook and LinkedIn didn't yell at us for this stuff, we're now doing it on our own.
Yes. And I don't know how to fix that. And that's probably one of the biggest issues that I'm running into is the immediate encampment where you're automatically, you are in this camp because you're not in the other camp. Or like I said something on Twitter, semi-innocuous, and I had somebody call me a MAGA idiot.
I will say, so I've been running pretty big communities online for a long time now, and I'm pretty used to having to kind of be thoughtful with my words. And in some ways, here's one way that I think it's better that a lot of people have missed. I'm going to use kind of a contentious issue, but hear me out on this. So a lot of people are very upset that there's male, female, and non-binary, and kind of everything in between. And we had somebody on our team years ago ask, would you mind using the pronoun they for me? I don't identify specifically as female. They present as female. We've always just assumed they were female. But it really brought to mind for us, we don't want to use these words to hurt you. You're already a valued team member. We think you're great. Like we love you and we want you to stay here forever and ever. So if a simple word shift, it doesn't affect me personally, doesn't change how I live my life, but it was something that they had to like work up the nerve at the time. Because now it's a lot more in the like vernacular, but it wasn't at the time. And so we had to learn kind of what that meant, you know, what is gender fluidity? What is non-binary? Like, what does that mean? And it wasn't just like, I feel like a girl today. I feel like a boy today. Like I would hate to have to explain to somebody over and over again, I know I look like this, but I'm actually a girl. I'm a girl. I swear I'm a girl. And I actually ran into that a little bit growing up because I was a tomboy and I would get teased for being one of the boys. No, I'm a girl. And I had to tell people, no, I'm a girl. And so I could kind of relate to it. And so I think that moment, because they didn't try to flame us, they didn't say, you know, if you don't call me they, I'm going to go tell everybody and make sure they boycott you, right? That was never a threat. It was just a request. And it led us to be a lot more thoughtful about our wording. So for example, now when we hire anybody, before they come on, as part of the onboarding, we ask, if you're comfortable sharing your pronoun with us, let us know so that we address you publicly in Slack or whatever by the pronoun you wish. But it's not required, right? But so that policing and that like aggressive behavior of so many people had to be done for it to become part of the vernacular, to where it's increasingly becoming like not a big deal. If you want to be called they, I don't give a shit. Like it doesn't impact my life. It doesn't change how I live my life. I don't care. If that makes you feel cared for and heard and seen as a human being, I want to be seen as a human being. So fine, whatever. But what happens with things like that, instead of it being kind of that innocuous, like one-on-one conversation, it's an immediate threat, it's an immediate attack. And it's this over aggression online, and how easy it is to attack people. Like that person that probably called you a maggot idiot, were they even using their real name on Twitter, or were they using some like,
Well, I'm sure they weren't. I mean, and I'm sure they had a bunch of numbers after their,
yeah.
John Smith 483645.
And so we are doing it to ourselves, but I'm trying to hope that there's some positivity to it, that at least when I am putting my wording out, I am more thoughtful about what I say, not just out of fear. So that's twofold. Part of it is for fear of being attacked, but I also don't want to hurt somebody, or it's not my nature to be disrespectful or hurt somebody. But if I accidentally call someone he that has transitioned and I didn't know, I don't deserve to have literal bags of shit at my house. I don't deserve that because I used the wrong word. But that's how far it's gone, like the doxing, and I've been doxed several times. So like I know what that feels like. But I hope that all of this aggression at some point, I think it's not dying down, but we're all starting to kind of ignore it, because it's like, oh, okay, here we go again. Like, yeah, we get it. Like, but I do hope that at least a positive is that we try to think through what we say, and we are more thoughtful, because that person that attacked you was not at all thoughtful, and that was unmerited.
No.
But easy because it's anonymous.
Well, and so that's an interesting, how long ago was this?
This
conversation.
This was in, I want to say 2014, 2015. Okay. So it's been a little while.
So back then, and I don't want to say that I understand everything that went into it, but I would guess that back then, to your point about it taking a lot of courage, that sort of conversation is now so much in the forefront that, yes, I understand that it's not a big ask anymore, and it's sort of the thoughtfulness that it requires. But the flip side to what we're seeing now, I think, is a little bit, and I would be curious if those who had to go through what your colleague went through several years ago are still feeling the same sort of energy attached to the issue, and is the energy positive. And I guess what I'm saying is that there's so much of this virtue signaling out there, where companies, as opposed to making it, hey, if you're comfortable, to your point, if you're comfortable sharing your pronouns, we're happy to use them, no big deal. You've gone from that to companies jumping on every single social justice bandwagon. That's part of now, okay, you have to use your pronouns as the beginning of the discussion.
But that's almost like, it's almost a litmus test. But I would argue that if a company, especially a large company, that's now saying their diversity, equity, inclusion efforts are forefront, if that wasn't something they were already concerned with just 5 years ago, is it sincere? And so I do think there's a lot of insincere PR moves that are being made to kind of jump on bandwagons, as you said. But I do think most consumers are getting better at being able to kind of pinpoint the sincere efforts versus the insincere efforts. And so I mean, I guess that's the other good side of it. But I will say, when it comes to energy, I think the energy levels for someone like our colleague are still there, because now they're in a situation to where it's kind of like most of America understands the term. They're starting to understand what non-binary is, for example, but there's still, now it's kind of like, if you grew up in a small town and, maybe in the late 90s or early 2000s, that one flamboyantly gay guy and the entire community came out. Of course, everyone's like, yeah, we know. But now that person is like under a spotlight for their behavior, because now they're a model for what all gays are supposed to be like. And anybody who might potentially be gay comes to them for advice and like, how'd you do it? And so there is still a lot of energy on anybody who isn't like just, male, female, anybody who's either transitioned or is non-binary. There's still a lot of pressure on them because there's still so many people that are not public with it that they have to now be like a fucking like adversary for anybody who's against that, or they have to like be a coach for anyone who wants to be that. So they have to be a model now. And so I think there's still a lot of pressure on those people. And so they do still have to put energy into it, whether they like it or not, because they're put in that position by being public with it, that they're now, either asked to speak on panels about it, or they're contacted privately by people saying, I think I'm feeling that way too, or children. Even there are several children in my family who don't identify as male or female. And so now we, have to look at that and say, okay, well, it didn't affect us. Now it affects us. I would never want any of the kids to think that I judge them in any way, shape, or form. I've always told them, just try your hardest in school. That's all I give a shit about. Like, I don't care if you tattoo your face, whatever, just try hard in school. That's it.
Well, that's someplace that I draw the line, and I'm not kidding. I think the
tattoos on face,
the face tattoo, the neck tattoo, I would be drawing the line
for your own children, or just for people in general.
For my own children. Yeah, I don't think a face tattoo or a neck tattoo is the way to go. Just my personal preference.
I live in Austin, so I don't care.
Yeah, but to your point about seeing whether or not companies are paying lip service, I think that's really it's a really interesting thought experiment to kind of like the next time you're out. I can think of an example from going to a coffee shop that'll remain nameless, but from going to a coffee shop and seeing the person behind the counter who presented with one gender, I would have guessed, but had a different gender name and obviously different gender first name on their work apron.
Mm-hmm.
What does it cost me as a fellow human to address them by name?
Yeah.
Nothing, I mean, and if somebody's got if you spent time in a healthcare setting, you see a lot of the doctors at hospitals, the young doctors especially, have their pronouns on their tag, on their name tag. Okay. It does not, I mean, it doesn't really cost me anything as a human.
Yeah.
Okay, that's he, him over there, and great. But I guess where I come from on a lot of this stuff is it lip service for the sake of trying to score virtue points, or is it really sincere? Is it sincere what happens behind? Like I was in the hospital a few weeks ago, and varying gender and races took care of me. I don't care. Do you know what you're doing? I mean, I do care, but I don't.
Yeah.
I didn't find it to be something that was like in my face either.
Yeah.
It was just, okay, this is how we're going to fix you. All right. You appear to know your stuff, and I'm looking forward to getting better. That's kind of it. And I think a lot of these things are, when it gets so pressed in your face, whatever the issue is, and you're faced with trying to gauge the intent behind the move, that's where I think a lot of people get really, okay, they start to go like this.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to watch it all play out over the next X amount of days and weeks and months and years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that when you talk about sincerity, I do think, especially people that are in like the department that are tasked with diversity, equity, and inclusion, they are very sincere. Those individuals that are tasked with that. And I do think there are a lot of individuals that feel they're the beneficiary of that. And so they feel very sincere about that. Does the CEO, what's good for business? A lot of them don't care. Just like whatever's going to make, that's their job. Whatever's going to make the boat move forward at the best pace. And so I do think some of it is insincere. I do think some of the marketing departments, but marketing departments, Marcom tends to be more liberal. So the advertising is going to sway more liberal regardless of what the demographic is, just because if you're sitting in a room with people that, are of a certain mind, I do think it is sincere in a lot of those instances. Whereas some companies, it absolutely is not. But I don't know. I think that our culture's going through a change. I don't think we had to be so aggressive with each other to make this change, but maybe it sped it up. I'm hoping that, the heartache was worth it culturally. But I mean, think about it in art. Well, okay, maybe not my lifetime. And I think we're pretty close to the same age, but just before our time, it wasn't even legal for different race people to marry. Like, what the fuck?
Right.
That's like a recent thing. So
Right.
if you compare that to where we are now, I think we've come a long way, but it also proves that we have room for improvement. We have room for improvement. Is the marketing sincere? No, but I think a lot of the people behind it really are.
I think on that note, even though we could probably go for another couple hours here, but
Probably.
again, I'm not Joe Rogan, you're not Jordan Peterson yet. Yeah, but hey, Lani, I appreciate it. This has been great. A lot
Thanks
of fun.
for having me. Yeah,
And
we did it.
Budget 30 minutes, do an hour 50. It's totally fine. That's totally fine.
Does our calendar know us? No, we were never 30 minutes.
Cool. Thanks so much. And I'm supposed to say this, right? At the end, pound the subscribe button and like this video and all that sort of stuff.
Smash that like button, subscribe, hit the bell next to it so it comes to your phone or whatever shit.
Yeah, you need to know exactly when that video drops. So thanks. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.